Hey everyone, I just woke up this morning and figured I would start Saturday? Saturday with an update. So wanted to talk about volatility, why volatility is good and why you should welcome it at this point in the journey and why even extremely predictable things are volatile. And I'll walk through some examples of that. So first of all, why it is good. Things that are volatile have the ability to go up. Things that are not volatile don't. So there is no asset, and I'll explain why this is the case in the second half of this video. There is no asset that has no volatility that has huge upside. That's just that asset does not exist in the world, which means if Bitcoin was very boring, meaning if it never changed more than 1% a week, up or down, it tells you we've probably arrived at Bitcoin being the monetary system of the world. Then that's just the way it is, and it's just going to be not volatile. And so if you want Bitcoin to have a huge upside, which I'm guessing you do, most people seem to want Bitcoin to have a huge upside, including me, because it means you're adopting the technology early in the technology adoption life cycle, then that means it's going to be volatile. So the volatility of Bitcoin means if it can plunge 27% in a series of weeks, that means it can also rise 40% in the series of weeks. So however big the downside plunges are, that tells you that it has the ability to do huge upside swings as well. Again, if an asset no longer has volatility, that means you're not going to get the same upside that you're going to get if you have some volatility with it. Okay, so all that to say, even though the price drops, are not fun, it is worth considering that every time there is a bright price drop, it's worth thinking, without these price drops, it would mean you were a lot later to the party. And so, the bigger the price drops, the earlier you are to the party. And that tells you that there's still a lot of volatility left in Bitcoin, which means there's still a lot of upside left in Bitcoin, which means you're still early to the process. Okay, so why are stable things valuable? So I'm going to use two hypothetical examples, one a stock and one actual gold. One second. Okay, so Bitcoin is the most predictable thing in the world. From the day of Bitcoin's launch on January 3rd of 2009, we have known exactly how many Bitcoin will be in circulation at every single point between that day and the year 2140, when the $21 million total coins is in circulation, which is the most Bitcoin that will ever exist, is 21 million. So however much you own, that is your share of 21 million that will ever exist. So why is something that's so incredibly predictable as far as supply, why does the price go all over the place? And the answer, of course, is because of demand. Is even if the supply is predictable, the demand is not. So let me give you an example of a hypothetical asset. Let's say I launch a stock on the stock market, and this is the Joel stock. And here's how it works. I just announced to the world, there's no good way of doing this, otherwise it'd be a fun experiment. But I announced to the world that there's this stock, trades under this ticker Joel, Joel, and it has this unique characteristic, that on day one, it pays a dividend of $1 on day one. On day two, it pays a dividend of $2. On day three, $3, all the way through day 1,000. And on day 1,000, it pays $1,000 dividend, and then after that, zero. It's worthless after that. Now, that would be the most predictable stock that has ever existed in the world, because on every single day for 1,000 days, you know exactly how much it's going to pay you in a dividend, and you know that at the end, it's going to be zero. Okay, so what would happen? You would think something that is completely predictable like that would have a linear sort of price rise or price fall, but that's not what would happen. So this thing is announced, and the very first thing that would happen is people would think, it must be a scam. Joel's not really going to do it. And so, but somebody's going to come along, and they're going to pay 50 cents for this stock that is going to pay $1 on the first day. Right before it even launches, somebody's going to pay 50 cents for it, thinking maybe I'll get lucky and he will pay $1 on the first day. Okay, so then I pay $1. So now you have a stock that should be worth at least $1, but it's trading at 50 cents, right? Because people are not sure the dollar will get paid. Well, as soon as the first dollar gets paid on day one, speculators are going to jump in, which, there's nothing wrong with speculation. And in fact, all investing is speculation to some degree. And somebody's going to jump in and say, wait a second, if he paid $1 on day one, I'll bet he's actually going to follow through with $2 on day two. And so what's going to happen? Well, somebody's immediately going to bid the stock to $1.50 or $2. Well, then somebody's going to say, hey, but wait a second. this stock is actually super valuable because he's going to pay $3 on day 3, $4 on day 4, all the way to $1,000 on day 1,000. Like, I don't know what that total is, 1,000 plus 999 plus 998 plus 997, work your way back. I don't know. Say it's $1 million. I have no idea what that math is. But anyway, or let's say it's 500,000. I think, what is that, 1,000 factorial? I don't know. Whatever it is. Anyway, let's call it $500,000 ballpark. So somebody's going to say, hey, this total thing is going to pay out $500,000 over the course of its life. That's at least worth $100,000. So the price very early is going to spike from basically nothing to $100,000. And then people are going to freak out and say, yeah, but what if Joel doesn't actually pay what he said he's going to pay all the way through day 1,000? And so the price is going to crash from $100,000, way down to $50 or something crazy. And then people are going to say, oh, wait, but he does keep paying. We're only on day 20. But on day 20, he's actually paying out the $20. Maybe that means on day 1,000, he will pay out the $1,000. So then the price is going to zoom from $50 up to $200,000. And then it's going to crash down to, $100,000. And then it's going to zoom to $350,000. Then it's going to crash to $200,000. And it's going to go all over the place. And towards the end of the 1,000 days, people are going to speculate, hey, maybe it's going to keep going past 1,000 days. So some people are going to be bidding on the fact that they think, even though the whole thing is programmed to not pay anything after 1,000 days, they're going to think, hey, maybe Joel will just keep it going. So people are going to bid the stock way high in anticipation. Then when it becomes clear that no, he said it goes to zero after 1,000 days, it's going to crash again. So when you take a step back and you look at that price over that time, it's going to be extremely volatile. Even though in retrospect, when all the dust settles, and it became clear that the whole thing worked just as planned, $1 on the first day, $2 on the second day, all the way through $1,000 on day 1,000, and then it goes to zero. Even though it did completely 100% the predictable thing it was supposed to do, if you look at the stock chart over those 1,000 days, it would be absolutely all over the place. So that's an example of something that is completely predictable, but that the human psychological behavior of people anticipating whether it's going to happen all the way through the 1,000 days, whether it's going to continue past the 1,000 days, and buying it in anticipation that, hey, if I buy it on day 4, I can get the value of all the days from day 5 through day 1,000, and so they're going to bid the price way past, technically, the $4 you're supposed to get on day 4. So very predictable things can be very unpredictable as far as value based on demand. So Bitcoin works the same way, even though the supply of Bitcoin is completely predictable, and even though we know in the year 2140 there's going to be 21 million, and the value of Bitcoin, it never goes to zero because the Bitcoin, unlike my stock example, Bitcoin never goes away. And in my stock example, it just goes away at day 1,000. Bitcoin never goes away. When it reaches 21 million coins, they continue to circulate for the rest of, human existence. Even so, even though that supply side is extremely predictable, the most predictable thing, frankly, that humans have ever created or that exists anywhere in the world, even so, it is, the demand side of what is that worth is all over the place. Although much less, volatile now than in the early days. So another example is gold. In the last 13 years or so, I think gold peaked at like $1,800 an ounce in 2011. Then it crashed to $1,200 an ounce between then and now gold is up at about $2,400 an ounce. So that's a wild price swing. That's a doubling of the price of gold over that time span. Of course, Bitcoin's up way more than that, but doubling the price of gold over that time span, and a crash from $1,800 an ounce to $1,200 an ounce, a 33% reduction in the price of gold. Now, gold's an asset that's been around for 5,000 years as a monetary instrument. People have been using gold for its monetary properties for 5,000 years. My prediction is that Bitcoin replaces gold because Bitcoin has superior monetary properties, able to be sent over space and time and more easily stored, more divisible, more authenticatable. It's just Bitcoin is superior to gold in every monetary way. But gold's been around for 5,000 years with a pretty predictable, 1.5% to 2% new gold gets dug out of the ground every year. That's 1.5 to 2% new gold gets dug out of the ground every year. So even with something that with as predictable as a 5,000-year-old element on the periodic table, its price can still swing pretty wildly after 5,000 years, and that's because gold was never fully monetized. Ultimately, gold was not lacked important qualities that would enable it to become the monetary system of the world. And so even though the world was on a sort of gold standard, not really, it was never really on a gold standard because, the fiat currencies were always sitting on top of gold, and those were always being inflated because you couldn't really use gold as a currency. And so fiat currencies were always, sort of, even if they were pegged to gold, they were sitting on top of it and they were fluctuating wildly in supply. So anyway, even the price of gold, which is the most predictable element as far as supply and demand in the universe, even that, the prices goes up and down considerably. So to recap here, volatility is a good thing. As long as there's volatility in Bitcoin, it means there's a lot of upside in Bitcoin. When Bitcoin is the future monetary system of the world, it will appreciate in value at the rate of productivity growth, which is about 2 to 3% a year, which means 100 years from now or 50 years from now or maybe even 30 years from now. If all you do is sit on Bitcoin, you should be able to have your purchasing power increase by 2% to 3% a year. And that is because the supply of Bitcoin will be fixed, but the total amount of goods and services that humans are capable of producing based on population growth and productivity growth is about 2% to 3% a year. So in the future, you'll be able to just sit on Bitcoin and your purchasing power will go up by 2% to 3% per year. And it will not be volatile at all when it is the future monetary system of the world. But that also means you're not likely to get upside of greater than 3% a year. Again, after Bitcoin is fully monetized, it is the world reserve asset. Everybody uses Bitcoin for everything, and everybody's forgotten about this whole fiat currency experiment that we temporarily got sidelined into for the last number of decades. But that's decades away. Until then, you should welcome the volatility because it means there's huge upside. And, there will continue to be a volatility in Bitcoin until it's $1 million per coin in fiat terms, or some level that indicates the total value of Bitcoin in the world is a massive amount as compared to the fiat in the world, which tells you that the world is using largely Bitcoin rather than fiat. And we're still, a long way, a decade or 2 or 3 away from that. So over the next coming years and decades, there should be a huge amount of upside in Bitcoin, and the recent 27% price decline indicates that there's still a good bit of volatility in Bitcoin, and that indicates there's still a potential big upside in Bitcoin, which is, one of the advantages of holding it. So to recap, you should welcome the volatility because it means there's upside. When there is no volatility, it means there's no upside. Number 2, even something completely predictable, like a stock that paid $1 on day one, $1,000 on day 1,000, and nothing after that, would be very volatile for the same reason. And even gold, which has been used for monetary purposes for 5,000 years and has a quite predictable supply side at 1.5% to 2% of new gold dug out of the ground per year, even the price of gold is relatively volatile over, the course of years or a decade or so. And that's, again, because it was never fully monetized. And if gold had been fully monetized, it would that volatility would no longer be there. Anyway, the volatility means there's upside. And last point I'll point out here, I posted an image right before this video on the Fear and Greed Index. So the Fear and Greed Index is a website that tracks how scared or, how fearful or greedy a market is. And that over the last month or this year, as it's gone from all-time highs to price dips, has switched from greed or extreme greed to fear. And I don't know if we're in extreme fear. Whatever the image I posted was, I think it was fear, but I don't know if it was like extreme fear or just fear. But now's a great time to buy. I think it was at a 26 out of 100, which tells you that people are, very nervous, dumping Bitcoin, and that there's a lot of fear in the market. And as Warren Buffett said, be greedy when everyone's fearful and fearful when everybody's greedy. So the best time to buy any asset is when there's blood in the streets and everyone's fearful and everybody's concerned about the future and what's going to happen with this asset. And so now strikes me as a fantastic time to buy Bitcoin. So hopefully this is helpful. Quick highlights on volatility, why it's good, and why even predictable things, including Bitcoin, the most predictable asset that has ever existed in the world, is still volatile, and why you should embrace that. So enjoy your Bitcoin journey and stack as much of it as you can at these cheap prices of $56,800. Enjoy the journey. Thanks.